Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and you're all very welcome here to the Irish Farmers Journal and this special edition of Around the Editor's Table. We are joined by the three men vying to become the next president of the IFA, Henry Burns, Joe Healy and Flor McCarthy. The three men have just finished a gruelling 7-week set of county hustings, and I'm sure they could be doing better things on a Friday evening, so we're delighted to have them here this evening. They're all very, very welcome. With all farm incomes under pressure, there is a need for farmers from every sector to be represented, so this election is one of the most important in the IFA's 60-year history. The 75,000 voting members of the IFA between now and Friday the 15th of April are voting to elect the 15th president of the association. For those of you that don't know the three men, Henry Burns is the current and outgoing chairman of the IFA's Livestock Committee. Henry previously served as chairman of the association's Sheep Committee. He is a suckler, beef, sheep and tillage farmer from County Laois. Joe is a dairy farmer and a beef farmer from County Galway. Joe is chairman of the Commonage Appeals Committee, a journalist with the Farming Independent, a former MOCRA president and a board member of Farm Business Developments. Finally, Flor is a suckler and sheep farmer from Kenmare in County Kerry. Flor is the outgoing chairman of the IFA's Rural Development Committee and is former chairman of Kerry IFA. Ladies and gentlemen, as ever, we probably won't get to cover all of the topics, but we are very keen to get your interaction and your questions, and I will, as chairman, ask the three candidates to keep their answers to the questions as brief as possible in the hope that we can cover as many topics as possible. You can send us your questions using Facebook and Twitter using the hashtag IFJDebate. You can email us ifjdebate@farmersjournal.ie, or indeed you can send us a text on 086 83 66 465. Gentlemen, I suppose a lot of our viewers and listeners this evening, one of the biggest issues facing them is quite simply farm incomes. And Henry, I'm going to put the same question to all three, and if I could maybe start with you, Henry, is if you were elected, if you were successful on the 19th of April as the 15th president of the IFA, what would you do to improve the farm income, the income of our viewers and listeners here this evening?
Well, the first thing to say, Justin, is, income is made up, obviously, of the price of the product. It's made up also of the cost of the inputs, what's taken away, and also farm income. We can't ignore over 100,000 of us still depend on the supports. And then the fourth thing that governs income, around income, is the cost of compliance, which has become a fairly costly issue for farmers now, both in terms of time, stress and workload. And I suppose on first one, on prices, there are some things we can do, there are some things we cannot. For instance, changing the world price of milk or grain is a very difficult one. Maybe on beef, for instance, more competition around live exports, certainly opening up exports to the UK, which, look, we have worked very hard on over the years, certainly trying to open up communication with the farmers in England and so on and drive that on. But mainly, I think the first start is there seems to be attempts to form a government here in Ireland. And what we saw during agriculture during the recession was the overall budget on agriculture being cut by 40%. And that has not been regrown through coming out of the recession to the extent it needs to be regrown. That's first of all, because, look, we've seen during that period exports grew from 9 billion up to 10.8 billion, but farm incomes have continued to go down. Farm incomes now are 67% of what they were in 1995, 24,400. Not far from half the average industrial wage, and that's not acceptable. So what would we do? What would we do? The first thing is, when the government is formed, hopefully there'll be a Minister for Agriculture, we have to put massive pressure on for an autumn budget to get an increase in the agriculture budget. So we can first regrow some of the schemes. The average to small farmer took a huge hit in the cut in reps, the cut in the disadvantaged area payment, cuts in suckler payments at the time, which are partly regrown. Those are huge schemes for the average to small farmer. Some of those farmers have taken a 50% cut in income because of those income schemes cuts. And the very least we need to see in the budget is an attempt to regrow those schemes. And then on the price issue around grain, the very least we have to see is getting at least the imported price. That's €10 under the imported price. We have to get into more premium products. There's the growth predicted in grain in the whisky industry is it's predicted to grow to 1.5 billion. And there's a lot of that Irish whiskey has no Irish grain in it, for instance. So that's one other area we can focus there on things like that. Around dairy, we have to do what we can with co-ops to push them to the maximum of their limit.
And Henry, I'm going to specifically look at dairy and tillage and in beef.
Okay. So, but the generality of incomes and around the compliance, we need to make that simpler for farmers so there's less stress there. And then on the other areas of farm income, it's a broader, maybe Justin will get a chance to discuss it later, but the whole thing around supermarkets and regulation of supermarkets, I definitely think that the 67%, farm income being 67% of what it is in 95, there's no coincidence with that, with the concentration of power at supermarket level.
Joe, same question to yourself. What would you do to address farm incomes as the 15th president of the IFA?
Well, I think the first thing to highlight, Justin, is the fact that the average farm income fell last year by 3% to 24,400, and that is just barely over half the 47,000 public service pay. So, that's not sustainable. We see every sector, almost every sector, dairy, beef, tillage, pigs, vegetables, produce below the cost, below what they're getting for their product. That's equally not sustainable. So I think that, what I've said every night in the hustings, the start would be to get the ANC repayments restored, the ANC payments restored to pre-2008 levels. Farmers took the hit in the bad times. We listened right through the recent general election, the government telling us that the recovery was there and we just had to keep it going. Let's see a small bit of that recovery and let the farmer be restored to what they were. So that would be a start. We need the various schemes that are there, the GLAS scheme to be of an amount that farmers feel worthwhile going into, and also have it more farmer friendly. And while I'm on the schemes, I think the genomic scheme for the cows, what I've called for every night, is a farmer friendly scheme, and a scheme that returns €200 per suckler cow. And people can argue that up and down. They might say that it should be front loaded, or that's maybe for another day, but we at least get it there. And the €20 per ewe, that has to be seen as a demand and a necessity, and not just a wish. So that would be around the various schemes. I think that a lot of farmers, just on the dairy side of it, were disappointed that are under pressure this year after paying a high tax bill at the back end of last year. We're hoping that something would be done in relation to the suspension of the super levy bill for a year, and that would have been a help, obviously. And there's mixed opinion on whether the intervention price should be raised. Some farmers feel it's only kicking the can down the road. Other people feel that...
What's your own view, Joe?
I think it should be raised. I think I'd like to see it raised to 24 cent a litre. I just feel that it's making it easy for the price.
As I say, Joe, we will deal with the specific sectors.
Okay.
But the big ticket items for you is what I'm getting. Like Henry, is the schemes getting more support from the National Exchequer.
Yeah, and more competition now in the marketplace as well for the beef in relation to live exports. It seems to be the only stick that we have against the power of the factories to ensure that the live exports are got out of the country. And the other side of it, there are two sides to, we'll say, getting a margin for farmers. Price is one side, but the other side is the whole input side. And the IFA commissioned report by IFPRI that was published there a couple of weeks ago, and in that it highlighted that if the anti-dumping tariffs and the import duties were removed from the fertiliser coming into Europe, it would save European farmers $1 billion a year, create 17,000 jobs net, and I suppose to bring it to a farm gate price, you're talking about a saving of €47 a tonne on average across the board.
I'll move it on because we will deal with some of those issues. Flor, again, same question to you, 15th president of the IFA. How are you going to tackle the key issue of farm income?
I suppose I think I take a new approach on the dairy side, especially. Do you know what I mean? We are kind of trading at world market prices at the moment, and we're producing, in the dairy scene, we're producing high in product. We have our green image, number one, and number two, we have an 8-month grazing season. That's why the baby powders, Baileys, and all these high margin products are being produced, a high percentage are being produced in Ireland. I think that's the first thing we have to highlight. We have to become less understanding why, like so the Glanbias, the Kerrys, we can see at the moment they're turning massive profits, increasing their profits at a time when our farmers' incomes are going on the floor. So I think we need to approach this in a different way. we need to demand what the farmer, as our president, I will be going to them saying what we need to stay in business, the family farm. And I'd be emphasising that the CEOs, the boards of these co-ops, will have to return a higher price to the farmers out of these high-end products at the time of price challenge like we have at the moment. And the major commodity would be the beef side of the thing. I think the first thing I would be doing is I'd be going for 4 regional meetings on the beef thing, trying to pull the finishers in, and we have to attack the issues that are important to these beef farmers, because this is not sustainable to be producing beef at the moment at 370 or 380 and the weight limits. We need a plan where we are going with our industry, and a plan how we highlight at times when we have a major difference between ourselves and Britain. I have to emphasise the whole time, across all our industries, we need a plan. Whether we can achieve the plan, we must set the bar high. Whether we achieve that bar, that's a day's work, but at least we have to be able to show to our members that we are feeling their pain. And that's the most important thing for the incoming president, that he feels the pain of the 85,000 members we have out there, because otherwise we can't expect to deliver. And I think strongly we hired professional advice, but the farmer must be feeling the pain himself, like myself on my own farm, when we're selling cattle, €1 is €1. So I think we have to bring that to the leadership of IFA. Like in the grain sector then, we need more support, maybe a bit of farm-to-farm trading. It's obviously the TAM support, which I was involved in myself, and we have brought in the 4.2 billion programme. I suppose the biggest challenge up to 2020 is to hold the government to their commitments. They have given the 46% core funding. We have to ensure now that that programme is delivered. Obviously, we are looking for increases, and I, for one, as Rural Development Chairman, would love to get higher increases. But I know in December 2013, when we did the deal with Indikini at the time, the country was in receivership at the time, and that was a difficult deal to get that core funding. But the core funding is one thing, but to get the money into the farmers' pockets now is the challenge. And we have to obviously improve on the schemes, and I'm all for more improvement in DLCs and disadvantaged area, but that's all on the preserve of how well our economy performs. And obviously at this stage, Justin, we are under pressure now. We haven't got stable government. It's a massively important time now to have a strong leader that understands the issues that affect the farmers on the ground, because we are going to face fierce challenges over the next 6 to 8 months, because we could have a government with a lot of independence pulling in different directions. That, for me, is a massive challenge.
I just want gentlemen to go into a little bit more detail. Now, I do have a reader's question in here, and I will come back to it because it relates. But, Joe, maybe if I could just tease out with you, and I'm surprised that we have, in dealing with the overall issue of farm income, we've kept very parochial, but I've no doubt that will come out in the wider debate in terms of the role of Europe. But, Joe, you mentioned the suspension of the super levy bill, for example. Like, are we giving farmers false hope, thinking, like, what business have we trotting off to Europe, looking for higher intervention prices, looking for higher intervention levels, looking for a suspension in super levy, when you've got the Germans and the French who are looking for supply measures? We're, as I said in the Farmers Journal this week, production up 30% on the month, production last year up 13%. And then we're going to keep pumping milk, and yet at the other stage we're demanding that Europe intervene in the market. Like, where's the credibility? Was there ever any chance of getting a suspension to the super levy?
I think there's always a chance of anything, Justin, if there's a political will and if the pressure and the power of numbers are behind you. And believe you me, and you said we're parochial here, and I know many dairy farmers, and I'm dairy farming myself as well as cattle. And the suspension of the super levy bill would be a huge help at a time like...
Nobody's denying it would be a help, Joe, but is it reality? Is Europe... That needs change at Europe. Is Europe... we have to be real here. The powerhouses of Europe now are the French and the Germans. And I presume we all have an understanding of where their positions are in relation to this issue. And how are we going to convince the French and the Germans that the Irish should get a suspension to their super levy?
Well, we've convinced many people down through the years of special cases for Ireland, and I think this is... I think the very first thing we could have done was to push a credible case for it, to look for it, and that hasn't been done. And dairy farmers are on their knees at the moment. Like, you know, it has to be a level playing field. I mentioned to you about the cost of inputs, and if we could have €47, if we were paying €47 a tonne less for fertiliser, then we mightn't be in such a bad way to get the super levy suspended for a year. Farmers it's a huge time of change on dairy farms, because it's the first year without the milk quotas. We went through a massive tax bill on most dairy farms last October. and you were facing into a year where stock numbers were held on the farm, so stock sales were down as well in order to be ready to produce more. And I think that at least for this year it should have been suspended. I suppose you could match it, Justin. No, absolutely not false hope, because if that's given farmers false hope, is the likes of the milk flex in Glanbia, the loans, when
that's achievable, that's
price,
happening.
But when milk price, yes, but if you listen to what I'm saying, when the milk price drops below a certain figure, then the farmers, that loan repayment will be suspended for the time being. Yeah. So, what different is about this? Because
this is a big difference, Joe. One's national and the other is a European issue where you have to have pan-European support. Henry, what's your views on the quota, intervention price, and the super levy?
Well, I think you've exposed the real problem that's there, Justin. You have about 4 to 5 of the main powerhouses in Europe going different directions. Yeah. That's the first thing. So I think what we have to do at European level as farm organisations, first of all, is try and knock our heads together a bit, because there's a responsibility on us at this stage. It's grand to go off in different directions. The French are trying to go off now with national funding and maybe incentivised to not to produce. We're trying to expand here. There's a confusion. And remember, there isn't massive overproduction here. It's been blown out of proportion. That's the first thing. There is not massive overproduction. What has happened here is consumption has slowed down a small bit. Production has accelerated, certainly. No doubt about that. But this is not, it's a massive problem at farm level on farm income. And we have to recognise, and that is definitely there for all the 5 countries. So if we could get our heads around the table a little bit and come out with a bit of a unified position, whatever it be, Justin, whether it be a bit of an increase in gender, it'll have to be a compromise. Let's face it.
Do you think we'll get that unified position, Flor, or do you think that's achievable at Europe?
No, the Germans, we have to face the reality. The Germans are the main power brokers in Europe, and I think you've rightly identified money is the issue with all problems. Now, we can all propose solutions, but to get the money for these solutions, so like the rural development programme there, the biggest issue probably is to keep the government funding that programme going forward. Obviously, sure, of course, I, more than anyone else, want to get increases in that programme, but we have to be also conscious now all the increases are coming from national funding. We don't leave any money, your EU money behind in Brussels, so you are right, we need to put the level with the farmers to tell them exactly how it is. But obviously, in a crisis situation, which we're in now, with milk getting down to us 24 cents a litre, or actually at 24 cents, and even to talk of it dropping another cent, we have to get some kind of supports in place. And obviously, the suspension of the super levy, or making the payments over a longer period, that is an option. That actually isn't getting rid of the payments, it's just prolonging the pain. I think that is achievable. But no, Justin, you are right to highlight that, we are playing, it's a tough market, we are playing with small players, and maybe we need to make better friends with the likes of the Finns and the Germans, because I see in my term as rural development chairman, they were going to review the disadvantaged area payments 5 years ago. The Germans didn't want it. It's now going to happen in 2018. He who writes the cheque is there to push out the rule. But, the markets are obviously a massive issue, and Russia being close to us at the moment. And what is even more worrying is at the moment I hear the PLCs are forward selling product at these low prices. That is worrying because it's going to sustain the problem going forward. They obviously don't see a big rise coming.
Would you support an intervention price increase, Flor?
I would, because we would have to hope that the floor would be that it may bring the floor, but obviously I would worry if a lot of product went into intervention. That is the real danger, and I can't see the EU going back to this situation where we previously had boats off the shore with butter in them. So there is issues there. I mean, I'd have to put more thought into it and have to have more advice, because it's very easy to propose a solution, but when the solution proposes to take stuff off the market, and that stuff is going to come back on the market, and we can move it to Russia or to some other third world market. If we can't, if it's coming back onto our own market, that obviously is a major concern.
I've a reader's question or a listener's question in here from a David Muldoon. We see our co-ops making massive profits, we see our beef processors making massive profits, and we see farm incomes crumble. Comments, Henry?
Well, look, yeah, that's obviously true. That's obviously true. And
what are you going to do about it?
Well, first of all, on beef.
Guys, I need short answers to these because I'm giving out to my ear. On beef, it's all about competition for us as farmers, Justin. And as I said,
we seem to have increased the number of cattle on the island. The dairy herd is obviously increasing, and we are finding as that goes along and the number of cattle increase, we are having trouble on competition on the island, certainly. But it is a fact also that the European beef market is at a low ebb from where it was 2 or 3 years ago. Prices are they're not in a good place. We're now exporting 500,000 tonnes of beef out of Europe. We're not importing as much. Consumption has gone down. So we desperately need the European economy to improve, being honest, number one, okay? Number two, I think the likes of some hope with the likes of the Egyptian deal or the Turkish deal on live exports.
And Henry, we are going to cover live exports,
okay.
But I just want to, Joe, maybe if I just move on to you on this issue. Like, for example, the GIIL model, where the PLC, where the margin is actually protected. Was that a smart move in that you had the dairy, it's for percentage owned by the farmer and a percentage owned by the PLC. But really, we're seeing an environment materialise where it's cost plus margin in every other chain bar the farm chain. How are we going to tackle that? That's obviously leading to what David is talking about, that everybody takes their margin and then they just pay the farmer the end price regardless of what his cost of production are.
Yeah, and it has come up every night on the hustings. And like, if I can say that on the super levy suspension, we're not trying to get out of paying for anything. All we're doing is putting it back a year to give farmers a chance. So I think it's important that going forward, look, there isn't a future there for farmers in the 5 sectors that I talk about if we continue to sell below the cost of production. We're price takers. I canvassed a man and he was also selling fuel, and he said, when I go to the house with my bag of timber and my bag of turf, he said, I tell the person that answers the door what I have to get for it. But when I go to the factory with my lamb or with my
how are you going
bullock,
to change that?
Well, again, it comes back to a competition in the marketplace and probably more transparency. You know, if you look at the retailers, some of them have referred to Ireland as Treasure Island because they don't have to show their profits here in this country. I think we need more transparency there, and we need some sort of legislation or an ombudsman type or a regulator to ensure that there's a margin there for the farmer, that the margin at the end of the line is shared back along the way. The retailer have their margin, the processor has their margin, but by God, the supplier, the farmer, has to have their margin as well.
Flor.
Well, I think the issue here is, the real issue here is everybody knows exactly what it's costing us to produce a litre of milk. And the margin for some farmers in difficult land, the cost of production are higher. We actually don't know what the PLCs, they're not opening their books to us to tell us what profit they're having. So it's quite obvious to me there's a fair level of profiteering going on. And obviously you are going to ask me how I'm going to deal with it. At least we must highlight what's going on there. And it's fairly disturbing, the returns that are coming out there this week, the rises in profits by the big players. And we obviously are all aware of the massive investments that they have made, that they are repaying. It's obvious that the farmers are taking away above their share of the pain. And we need to obviously see that they are also cutting their costs. When we see milk price dropping, and we see the Carbery, the Three West co-ops paying 3 cents a litre more all through the summer, that was €10,000 on for a fairly handy supplier more. For that, if his milk went left versus going right, we have to highlight that, and we have to be in at the table driving that, and that's the way. That's what IFA was set up for. And I think we have fallen down here, but we are trying to understand why we can't get the price. We have to focus in. I know there's only a small amount of the milk being used on the high-end products and the returns, because what they're doing is not far from a two-cart trick. They're buying our product and they're selling it on to another company, and therefore the profits are being derived. We have to try challenge that.
But surely it's farmers, and this leads me on to the next question around corporate governance and dairy co-op boards. Surely it's farmer board members that are allowing their chief executives. Like, at the end of the day, we can say what we like about the beef industry, but in fairness to the dairy industry, it's owned and controlled by farmer members sitting around the board. Flor, do you feel that there's an issue around corporate governance, and that maybe a lot of these board members are maybe led by the chief executives of these companies rather than actually challenging them because of the selection process for people going onto these boards?
Well, it wasn't the PLCs. It's quite obvious that the CEOs and 2 or 3 people that are making decisions, that the boards, now the number of farmers on the boards have reduced. But I don't think that's the real issue. The challenge for our organisation is to highlight the issues that are there. And I think we have to be in at that table, highlighting them. And I won't be hypocrite and say we will achieve it, but we have to, for our members to be satisfied on the ground, we have to be seen to challenge what's taken for granted. That is what IFA needs to restore the credibility of the organisation.
So the corporate governance on co-op boards.
Yeah, I think, and I've spoken to dairy farmers in the last few days, and they've been extremely annoyed over, in particular, two particular companies that have shown huge profits in the past year. One of them 700 million, and they're squabbling over just over a cent a litre to farmers. And then they look at whether it's reports on the various agricultural journals or what, that the salaries of the people running those organisations have increased substantially over the past year, while the farmers have seen the price of milk go through the floor to the level at the moment where it's below the cost of production. So that's very difficult for farmers to take, and CEOs are pretty powerful, and we have instances, and there are a lot of very good people on boards, but I think that there's probably more need for scrutiny for people who let
Should we have a better, if you look at the Ireland, the Fleece and Campinas, should there be a better selection process?
Yeah, I think there should actually, yeah.
Henry, I'll bring the same question to you, and maybe if you go on, because I think you sat in the board of, is it Mount Rathmart? Or, no?
Well, it was, yeah.
You were the board.
But
So you have experience of these boards and how they operate. Your own views, maybe outside even of the dairy co-op, because obviously mart boards are an important element as well.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot. I think around boards in general. I think, in fairness to us as farmers going in onto boards, I think there is a bit of need for training. There's a bit of need of an awareness. I'm not saying we're all good businessmen. We're able to run. I think for us to survive to where we have, and you see the figures, farm income gone down since 1995. I think we're good magicians at what we do. And we're ahead as well, screwed on. But sometimes the backup that CEOs have, the backup they have to advice, the backup they have, the power of advice they have at their hands. I think there is a role in somewhere in the middle for the board to get some independent advice on these issues. I think there's an independence and a transparency needed there on training. And then around something I didn't mention on the meat factory thing as well is transparency is hugely important. And one thing we don't have. There's always accusations on one side that the meat factories don't make money. There's accusations on the other side that do. We don't know. Yeah. I know one thing, they've resisted transparency all the way. In America, they have to report.
I will come back to the beef sector, and I suppose it leads me on because it's certainly something that I have had been challenged with, and I'll put it to each and every one of you as well, and it links into the co-op board structure, but in the context of tillage farmers. And one thing we have is of a board sitting down to set a grain price, and a board that's predominantly made up of dairy farmers with very little tillage representation on it, and co-ops that are buying now the largest share of tillage, and we see grain prices at a level below what they were 30 years ago now. Is that fair? Is that right? Can we have a sustainable tillage industry where effectively it's boards from another sector that are setting the price they're getting? Maybe Joe, I'll start with you on that one.
Look, I've even said it even within the IFA that I think there could be a lot more use made of the committee chairman when they're talking on a specific area as opposed to the president talking on it. So I do think that, in answer to your question, that setting a price on anything, it's dairy farmers that are on the boards of co-ops to set the price on milk, okay? And I think when it comes to setting the price on tillage, or grain, it shouldn't be dairy farmers making the decision on the price of grain. Like we've seen the example given, Justin, of €115 a tonne mentioned for grain for the coming year. And at that, even at 3.25 tonne to the acre, and like the perfect storm will arrive sometime, 3.25 tonne and €40 an acre for straw, even on their own land, there's a potential loss of €50 to €60 there. So your question was, is it sustainable? It's not sustainable.
Could I just, and a quick yes or no answer, would the other two candidates support Joe's position in relation to that it shouldn't be dairy farmer board members should set in the grain price, that there should be a tillage, obviously a sub-board on the tillage side?
There is in some co-ops, and I think they should be activated. I think now because of the dominance of dairy, and I think there's a lot of unrest about that out there, Justin, and yes is the answer.
Flor?
Yes.
Yeah. Guys, I suppose how can we or how should we be? The tillage industry is under a lot of pressure, certainly as we see growth in the dairy and in the Conacre market becoming under a lot more pressure. But yet we see grain farmers taking, Joe, you mentioned the price of 115, maybe not as low as that for some farmers, 130 grain a tonne off the combine, and yet ration price is still north of 200, 220 euros a tonne. Like, how can we square that peg, or what role would you see IFA, maybe Flora, I'll start with you, what role would you see IFA as having in terms of trying to promote feed inputs from fully traceable native sources, both where it be protein or energy?
What we could do is encourage more farm-to-farm trading, but we need to bring in a structure where the payment is guaranteed. There would be definitely a lot of more farmers, dairy farmers, buying direct from grain farmers. But the problem is the payment issue is the big issue. Maybe there's a certain amount of a lag when the money is available to pay. So we need some structure put in place that it guarantee the payment maybe 3 to 4 months later. But that the farmer, like you sell cattle in the market, the payment is guaranteed. That's the first thing. That still will only be small money. But obviously we need more support, because the grain sector is a vital sector. But unfortunately we see the pig sector under stress as well, which are major users of this grain. So, I mean, it is worrying when we see dry grain, rolled barley at the ports at the moment, 160 a tonne. Now, it's a massive issue, and there's no real solution. You know, we can't solve world prices. Obviously, if there's some weather event, farmers are optimists. They will still keep ploughing. On the Train Trail now, you see lots of farmers are still out ploughing, full of enthusiasm, but we need to cut down the cost, the fertiliser, the spray cost. They have to get the same cost base as the Americans. We have a higher cost base here because we've less sprays, less fertilisers, less tariffs. These issues have to be tackled to give them any chance of survival. And immediately, I mean, we're not talking about it happening 17 or 18. It has to happen this year, because otherwise the grain farmers will go out of business, and that's bad for us all.
Joe, has the IFA a role in facilitating more? And I know Fintan Conway does an element of it, but is there a formal structure that the IFA could participate in to facilitate more farm-to-farm trading?
Well, there is, and depends on the farmers you talk to. I spoke to one grain farmer who's having great results from farm-to-farm trading, nearly everything he grows there, and he has his set customers. Another farmer I mentioned it to, he said, "Oh, don't go there, Joe." He said, "Aren't we owed enough money as it is?" You know, so you have that mixture there. So it's something that the IFA could encourage, whether it's a database of farmers that would be willing to buy and sell. You know, you would have to, the credit side of it would have to. What would you do
for the tillage farmers, Joe? What one thing, if a tillage farmer is listening or watching here tonight, what's the key deliverable that commitment that you would make to the tillage sector?
Well, I think no more than any sector, Justin, the input costs are huge. And, I mentioned the 47 euro per tonne and fertiliser a few minutes earlier in this interview. And if there was one thing, price is one thing. I think the inputs are just as important, the other side, the cost of those. So I would immediately go after that to try and get whatever political pressure at European level to get that reduced as low as possible.
Henry, we see the ban, or a proposed ban, coming in now on glyphosate and the technologies that are European technologies that are being adopted in the US in terms of ramping up corn production. And yet we're expecting effectively our tillage industry to operate in a regulated market and selling into a deregulated market. How is that sustainable?
It's not. It's not, and
what are you going to?
I mean, it's not, and even the whole argument about GMOs. We're importing loads of GMO feed in here. We wouldn't have chicken and pig production here without GMO feed, and people are, we have to operate in the free market as it is. On the grain side, have been doing for a number of years. I think the first thing we have to do, Justin, at European level, is take this sentiment out of it, this madcap sentiment that's dominating the European Parliament. There's an amount of it there, and it's driven not on the basis of science in general, Justin. We have to bring more science to it. We have to be more forthcoming about explaining to people and not be afraid. There's almost a sense that we're afraid to go out and say that we're spraying a crop. We're almost feeling guilty before we prove ourselves innocent.
Guys,
and just on the tillage thing, specifically on the tillage thing, if there is going to be more farm-to-farm trading, Justin, the facilities out there are a key issue. And look, when you're a grain farmer, the TAMS, okay? TAMS is a key facility, and it can't be super-duper high-spend stuff. It needs to be relevant to the ordinary farm that wants to do up a few sheds. The guy can do the work himself, some improvements around the farm, either on the livestock farm or on the grain farm, so that we can handle this stuff. And the mix of crops would be crucial.
Guys, I've just been told I have to go for a quick commercial break, but before I do so, have any of you got a position on the renewable energy sector and the potential of the renewable energy sector to actually provide an alternative to tillage? We see what's happening in Germany, we see what's happening across the UK and in other member states where a lot of money is being given. We've a report recently in terms of the potential to produce 3.7 million tonnes of miscanthus straw, husk to convert Money Point into biomass. Like they're huge opportunities or huge advantages that our competitors are being given across Europe, and yet we've really sat in our hands, and the IFA hasn't really had a policy on that in terms of actually farmer-led renewable energy schemes. What's your views?
I was see, we're comparing to the Germans. They have major supports in place. Their price of electricity is way higher than ours. We have major problems with feed-in tariffs. We've, obviously in a lot of parts of the country, we haven't the grid available to us. So there's issues beyond just even profitability. But obviously at the moment with the low oil prices, the margins are small. But it's obviously an area we have to look at, because we have seen where people have benefited out of renewables, and it's also part of the overall plan. But the feed-in tariffs, you have to have a guaranteed price over a longer period. And our government, that's unfortunately the problem we have here in Ireland. We haven't a national government having the funds to support this, and that's.
But should this be something that we should be pushing Ireland's agriculture's role as being a solution for the climate change rather than?
We are, Justin, and in fairness, look, I mean, unfortunately, there are people with 2 years straw out there at the moment that haven't been paid for it. There are people with miscanthus over the last 10 years that have had a bad burning, So
but we grew the product before we had the market. If we had Money Point converted,
in fairness, they were given some promises on feed-in tariff. In fairness, Justin, they were given some guarantees. They weren't written down, to be fair, and that makes us very sensitive. So,
should that be an area? And I suppose
it needs to be written down.
Yeah,
it needs to be written down firmly.
Should that be an area that we should be looking at as an alternative income source?
Because we have the power plant in Killala where they're importing from America and ferrying or lorrying it down from Killybegs. I think there's a huge market there, even for the straw. We produce 1.3 million tonnes of straw per year, and there's, I suppose, with the growth in slatted sheds and everything, the use for it and the sale of it is hit big. And we have 10 power plants in the UK being powered by straw. And there's no reason why that can't be done here, but there doesn't seem to be the political will necessary to do it. If we could do it, it would be a huge help for, and it was also mentioned to me by tillage farmers, why not power them by grain? So
ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to take a quick commercial break just to allow the guys to freshen up and replenish the water supplies. We'll be back with you within the next 2 minutes. Thank you very much for your attention. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Around the Editor's Table debate, and we're delighted to be joined by the three IFA presidential candidates, Henry Burns, Joe Healy and Flor McCarthy. This is the second part of Around our Editor's Table debate. We've already discussed the issues in relation to farm incomes, dairy incomes and indeed the tillage sector. And I'm now going to move on to the beef sector, and over the next 15 to 20 minutes we'll look at the beef sector and issues specifically in relation to the IFA and where the IFA is going into the future. Henry, maybe if I could start with you as a livestock chairman. You've been front and centre of the IFA's campaign on beef over the last 4 years, and I suppose it struck me today when I was just doing a bit of research for this evening that if you actually look back, where our beef price today is about 10 cent a kilo lower than what it was when we were out protesting outside factories 2 years ago, yet we don't seem to hear an awful lot about it. There's not a lot of jumping up and down going on. What's different? What's changed? Is this campaign a distraction? Why are we not making more noise about what is happening at the minute?
Well, we are, Justin. We are making noise all the time about the beef price. I think there wouldn't be a week going by where you and the Journal or ourselves wouldn't be saying that there's a problem. I think I did a seminar down in Kilkenny earlier in the year, and we said that I think coming out of that we needed $4.30 a kilo for winter finishing of cattle, and I think we're clearly not getting that and a long way off that. And I slaughtered cattle yesterday morning, so you don't have to remind me about it, unfortunately. And I think what's different is we are struggling. We are struggling a bit from the point of view of competition. We've killed 3,000 bulls more per week this year than last year. Obviously, we've brought forward some cattle, and that has left us in a weaker position in competition. We live exported less cattle last year. So we seem to have less competition. But to be fair, at the moment, the gap between ourselves and the UK is about 40 cents a kilo, where it was up around €1 a kilo at that stage. Our counterparts in Europe are on a similar price, or thereabouts the same as ourselves. While it's not sustainable for us, it's not sustainable for them either. The French farmers have been protesting for over 2 months and haven't got 5 cents of a rise.
Does this raise a bigger question, Henry, in relation to, and it's something we've raised in the Farmers Journal, but it's gained very little traction. Have farmers benefited from year-round supply? Should we be producing cattle year-round in this country? And if not, why don't the IFA say, right, guys, it's not working, back to seasonal production?
Yeah, well, we haven't had that seasonal price rise for good few years. Actually, the opposite is true. If you graze cattle, there was a better benefit. It was a better benefit, and that would seem to be the way. We were encouraged into that system because of the retail trade and so forth. It's heading back there if something doesn't happen, Justin. It's as simple as that. Where we are is not sustainable on winter finishing. It's heading back to a more seasonal production system.
Joe, in terms of heading back, and I read recently at an interview piece that you did, and you were highly critical of the QPS, and you have been critical of it. And you said it should be scrapped and we should revert back to a flat area based payment. I was surprised at that, certainly given the quality of produce that would be produced in County Galway, in your own county. Is that where you see the future, going back to a flat area based payment, or where do you see the
First
whole
of all,
area
I'd like to find out where you read that I had it scrapped, because I have never said that it should be scrapped. I have at all times said it should be reviewed, and even the scientist that was behind it, Michael Drennan, in your own paper about 2 years ago, was strongly of the opinion that it should be reviewed, and that the gaps, because at all times I've always said that quality cattle has to be paid for, and they need to reap the rewards for being quality cattle. So I think in its current state, number one, the gap between the increases of the 6 cent, that should probably be 8 to 9 cent at the moment, if you follow the science through from where he...
Would that be something all candidates would agree with?
You have to follow the science, Justin.
Flor?
Yeah, the science.
Okay, sorry.
So, and that's what I've always said right throughout any time that I've mentioned it. And especially, Justin, since the weight restrictions came in, because the weight isn't allowable now on the good side to bring the money across. Like when you have a cut-off at 420 kilos, the good cattle, they're really only coming into their own at 450 kilos. And I said that to a man today, and he said 470, 480. But we see the majority of those good cattle, U minus or better, kill out between 422 and 468 kilos. So when you have the cut-off there at 420 kilos, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as a lot of beef farmers are concerned.
Or is that the quality payment, the 12 cent quality payment? Like the QPS is something very different. The differentials still stay the same, irrespective of carcass weight, Henry. And I've heard you say this before, in that weight was never an issue on the QPS.
Yeah, but we're seeing at the moment, Justin, the heavier animals, if they're being cut at the 420 kilos, many of them are not getting the.
Well, they're being cut on the base. They're not getting the 12 cent a kilo.
12 cents.
Yeah, but that's a separate to the QPS. And I suppose that's something they've always been tangled into two.
I think, Justin. I think on the QPS, like the first thing to acknowledge is that, for the people that go to the rounds of breeding the better cattle, we had about 9 cents of a difference between an O and a U before it came in. We now have about 30, and that, like, for the 400,000 cows across the Shannon, that's a difference of 25 million, because they'd be all bringing they'd be all bringing the R's and U's, they'd be all the pluses, So the first thing to acknowledge there, but certainly the weight limit is causing a problem. And there's, we haven't had any science to back up that. We haven't had any good analysis to say that this weight limit is a problem or otherwise. I think we, in fairness to suckler farmers, our very best suckler farmers, all they have on output, and you see this through your better farms better than anywhere, all they have on output is the weight. And I think the fact that there's only 11% of the cattle over 420 kilos for the whole country, it's a huge issue for the suckler farmer at an income level, but the fact there's only 11%, I don't buy that is the marketing problem that they make out.
But should the IFA and Flora, I'll ask you to address this one. Should the IFA be saying, yeah, you need to finish these big cattle at 470 kilos, or should they be informing the debate with the facts? The only person I see putting facts into this debate, or whether they're facts or not, I don't know, but making an argument for this debate of weights are meat factories. Yet we haven't got nobody. We have a national or state advisory service out there. Nobody has asked for there to be any analysis in relation to the link between carcass length and loin size, for example. Are these better quality cattle longer? Why? Surely that's the role of the IFA.
Well, I think we have to go back to the kernel of the problem. I mean, we have three main bios here: Goodman, Keepeck and Don. And there's definitely a monopoly. I think we have to face
you
the
called
challenge.
it a cartel, Flor, in previous, and it's something I do want to challenge you on in terms of we need to sort it out. How are you going to? That's easy to say, but hard to do.
I agree totally with you, Justin. It's very easy to see.
Yeah.
But this organisation was founded on these same principles when we stood in the steps of Dublin and government buildings when we were denied the right to negotiate on behalf of farmers. We were less organised, and I would hope at that stage that we are better organised now with professional advice. Now we have to challenge and we have to try to highlight, and you are right to say, I presume there's a cartel there. I can't actually say that, but we have to get to the root of this. And the way they're controlling the prices, they're using the 30 months, they're using the weight limits to discount our cattle, our products. And I'm not encouraging people to go for heavier weight cattle or overage cattle, but I want people to have the opportunity, especially the smaller producers, to be able to sell their load of cattle together. At the moment, when the cattle come up to 30 months, they have to move off at 2 or 3. It's breaking, even the smaller guys, the small bit of bargaining power they have has been denied them. Because most cattle, as it's shown, are killed at under 31, 32 months. So these limits are just used to discount. But getting back to the real problem is that we have to try expose that there is all the prices have been controlled, because we had a major advantage this summer where there was a bigger margin we had in Britain because of the strong sterling. We are now seeing the sterling weakening. But we can accept the lower prices when the sterling weak. But when the advantage is with the farmer, we must get the advantage. And these crowds are all private companies. We see them on the rich list, but we can't see their margin.
Yeah, but what are we going to do about it, Flor? You said we have to tackle, if you become president, you'll tackle the beef cartel. What does that mean?
Well, it means that, you negotiate with them first, and then if you don't succeed, you pick the weakest leg in the tree, and you take it on. That's the way any fight. You don't look for a referee. In the Kerry team when they're going out, they don't look for a referee.
Is this in relation, and taking us on to the beef forum, Flor? Where do you sit in the beef forum?
If it doesn't show real results on behalf of farmers, you will negotiate.
If you become the next president of the IFA, will you remain in the beef forum?
Well, we'll see what can be achieved, but we'll set a time scale on it. If there isn't something delivered, we have to move on to the next stage. And we have a European Commissioner as well.
You've been highly critical of the beef forum. Will you remain in the beef forum?
And I suppose, Justin, the reason why I've been highly critical of the beef forum is because I'm reflecting the views of the beef farmers that I've spoken to week on week for the beef report for the Farming Independent. So, I'm reflecting those views, and they're not happy because they feel that the beef forum just hasn't delivered for them. We have seen, while people are sitting at the beef forum, we have seen the weight come in the weight reduced to the 420 kilos. We have seen the gap between the animal here in the UK open up from an average of 100 in the previous 10 years, and €100 of a difference, to €300 last year. We have seen, and I know you might say that it's only 11% of the cattle, but those 11% of the cattle that are being restricted now due to the weight restriction are from the suckler herd in the main, a very, very vulnerable herd, and they're a huge percentage of the herd. And while
assuming that this is the most profitable system, Flor, you talked about cattle over 30 months, and Joe, you're talking about up to 470 kilos. It's a challenge, and I suppose leadership, guys, is not always about telling farmers what they want to hear. Is the challenge to actually say, well, are these the most profitable animals, 470 kilos? Are they the most profitable animals?
There's never a word about the weight when cattle numbers are scarce. It seems to come in all the time when cattle numbers are fairly plentiful, when they're scarce. And the fear that I have going forward is if you move into shed-fed cattle to get them out at the weight, we lose one of our best marketing tools, the green image. You know,
Yeah.
so that's
Henry,
that's very important.
Is the beef forum your Achilles heel in this debate? It has been thrashed about. Look, I'm not going to say
anyway. It's not mine anyway.
I've been critical of it myself, and
Yes.
so I'm not going to say anything that I haven't already said. But are you disappointed with it? You have to be disappointed with it.
Yeah, I'm disappointed. I am disappointed with the traction on some of the. But in fairness, Justin, if you go through the 2.5-page document where the agreements were made under huge pressure over 19 hours in negotiations when farmers were ready to go back to factories, you'd have to say there's not an awful lot in there that most farmers wouldn't agree with. That's written down, you know. And if an awful lot of it was implemented, which some of it is, and on the way to being implemented, it would improve the lot for farmers. So the key now is to get it implemented. As Minister Coveney came to the end of his tenure in government, he seems to lose interest in putting the traction into it. And look, the hope is if you get a new minister, you put him in there and you put the traction into making that agreement implemented. Things like around the carcass grading, the carcass trim. We've been arguing about those for years. At least we got to a table where it got openly discussed between factories with the department this is the issue. You have to put the department in the centre. They are front and centre on some of these issues, and the minister is ultimately responsible to us. We complain about the lack of competition in the beef industry and the way our hands are tied behind our backs. At the end of the day, the Minister for Agriculture gives them their licence to operate, and he has a responsibility to us. He is the policeman in the middle from the point of view of monitoring trim, carcass grading, a lot of those issues which take a lot of money away from us. And there is an agreement there now that there would be more monitoring and more proper monitoring of those.
Will you maintain the IFA presence around around the forum table?
You can call it what you like, Justin. But the reality is here, for whoever is IFA president, they're going to have to deal with the minister, the meat factories, Bord Bia and Teagasc. And you can deal with them together or separate, whichever way you want. You can call it a forum, you can call it whatever you like. But the reality for the next IFA president, whoever he is going to have to engage those people to get results. And you have some hope if you get them all around the one table. We've been given out for years that there is no plan for the beef industry in Ireland going forward. There's no coherent plan between factories, Bord Bia, whatever. How have you any plan or hope if you don't put those people around the table? And you know as well as I do that over a period of time, that's a year and a half going. I've seen times where, look, okay, in my time on sheep, for instance, there was a sheep strategy group set up, and for the first year and a half, sheep farmers gave out about it. John Malone was the chairman because it didn't appear to be yielding results. But the second year and a half that it was in existence, it yielded 90 million from Europe. It didn't on its own, but it yielded, for the first time ever, a sheep fencing grant for farmers, which took out some of the labour, mobile handling grants, and it eventually delivered marketing money from the EU.
You're shaking your head there.
You have to stay with
the forum has failed Irish farmers.
Will you pull out of it, Joe?
Well, I will stay nowhere that there isn't delivery for farmers. And we have seen the beef farmers' lot has continuously deteriorated over the past number of years. Like 10.6 million, and that was the IFA's figure. That's what the weight restrictions has cost Irish farmers. 10.6 million is an awful lot of money for Irish farmers that are working at a loss.
We see those rate restrictions, Joe, in place in the UK. In our main export market. Can we bury their head in the sand? And it comes back to, I suppose, my concern that we're telling farmers everything that they want to hear. No. But at the end of the day, there's weight restrictions in our main export market, in the retail market.
Yeah, but they're getting 300 euros in the past year.
They're not at the minute.
In the past year, and let this year average out, but we take the year over an average, they're still getting 160 euros ahead more in the UK.
Is that the difference between penalising farmers for out-of-spec animals and rewarding? Do we run the risk here that we actually are...
spec? They just keep moving the goalposts. The grid is on wheels.
Are we penalising are we expecting farmers that are producing a product suitable for a market to pay for the product? Because at the end of the day, processors are going to make the same money regardless.
To be fair, Justin, we are going into 24 different countries. Okay, we're not going into the same market with everything. We have we have a growing dairy herd, we have a suckler herd, which is very specialist, which is creaking at the seams on income, okay, on one side, and you have the dairy herd growing on the other side. We are not, the figures are showing, we are not growing our overall carcass weight. Last year our overall carcass weight grew because of a good grass year, but we're not breeding more of those cattle. They are very good cattle, actually at very young ages. I was with a good farmer today that killed bullocks at 24 months and they were 470 kilos, you know. And I mean, look, you have to allow for the fact, Justin, and here's the pertinent question. When asked at the beef forum, Bord Bia, and this is the answer really, when asked at because that's what you get the chance to flesh these things out. When asked, If we had all the cattle at 380 kilos or 400 kilos, how much more steak would we get on the supermarket shelf in England? And the answer was none. The answer was none because we already have ample supplies of the lighter cattle for that market. I think the thing we would not want to do, Justin, is put all our eggs into the one basket. We've seen, you know as well as I do, that beef markets evolved over a period of time. And sometimes heavier cattle are needed, sometimes not. If we change all our breeding to the one direction, we may leave ourselves open in markets in the future.
I want to bring you in this in terms of the beef side. Again, you're a suckler farmer. You know the plight of a lot of the beef farmers farming marginal land and suckler farmers. What would a Flor McCarthy president actually do different that hasn't been done in the beef industry? What new ideas or new thinking would you bring?
Well, it was first thing I do straight away after becoming president. I'd hold 4 regional meetings and bring finishers into them. I put the development officers out, get them in. I feel at this stage they'll be ready to come in because the price is so low. You know, they're getting a bigger margin off the factories. I think they will engage with IFA. And I think we have to come up with a plan because the weaning producer needs €1,000 for his weaning. With the weight limit, that is not sustainable. The supplement realises that the finishers cannot keep coming back. That's why the heavier carcasses are needed. There's no other way to make a margin on these good weanings, barring the cattle are cut into heavier weights. That's the system we've had here. We have a grass-based system where people graze cattle. And, you know, we have to, and that's what the consumer wants as well. I think we are being slightly hoodwinked. And like you said, maybe we need a bit more research by Taggart to highlight the benefits of our green image. We can't be just talking about the green image. We have to actually show that we are grazing the cattle extensively. And I think if that was explained more to the consumer, that is actually what the consumer wants. These factories are obviously using these triggers like the 30 months, the weight limits, to get our stock cheaper. And, you know, it only happens at a time of plenty. So, I mean, we have to find some measure. I won't be a hypocrite and say I have the solution, but we have to be seen to at least take on this, what's happening at the moment.
Just to finish on this overall issue, just to finish on that overall issue and the whole thing. Like, Justin, there's one easy way with this. If factories were prepared to pay for the lighter cattle, they're not. And they're not. And that's the market signal is not there. And I mean, at the end of the day, over the years, I've been beef farming since 12 years of age. I killed my first cattle. Over the years, hanging on the hook was always a better chance of making money than not.
And the lack of competition, Justin, the lack of competition from the live exports is a crucial issue.
Well, guys, I'm being told to move on. In terms of just before we conclude on the livestock side, just an interesting question in there from a reader. Have we too many marts in the country? Just yes or no?
I suppose we have. But
Joe, you should be well positioned.
Yeah, I think we have too many marts because what buyers want when they come to a mart is a large selection. And I think the smaller marts are losing out at times that they don't.
I don't think we have actually, Justin, because they're providing a valuable service in a local area. I was in Drumshanbo last week, and you know it's not. And look at what they're doing. I don't actually think they have. They're a small margin business, often owned by farmers, but kept going. The infrastructure was put there by our forefathers. And they are kept going, like our own mart at home would be example. It did struggle for a few years, but now it's a very vibrant weaning and store cattle mart again, and it's providing a valuable service in a local area.
We are losing out on competition around the ringside because of small marts. A lot of buyers wouldn't go to a small mart because there aren't enough numbers there. And I think if we had less marts with bigger numbers of cattle, you'd have more competition around the ringside.
With the highest concentration of livestock marts.
We have 7 in Kerry, but you know, a lot of these marts trade seasonal as well. There's big marts there in the seasonal time of the year, so they are providing a service. But actually having 7 in Kerry is fairly crazy that we actually have 7 marts in the county. But they're all seem to be trading fairly strongly at the moment, which is a positive from a farmer's point of view.
Mm-hmm. Guys, I just want to, and before we move on to and conclude with IFA issues, just the importance of Europe in this, and it was touched on at the start, and we haven't, and it would be a miss here to talk about farm incomes and money from National Exchequer, but at the end of the day it all peels into insignificance if there's a Mercosur trade deal or a TTIP. Give me your credentials in Europe. Henry, briefly now, what's your position? How would you negotiate this? Who would you meet? What would you do? What doors would you knock on?
Well, Justin, look, I suppose my credentials are I've been going to Europe for the past 10 years regularly as a sheep chairman, first of all, and as livestock chairman. I'm currently chairman of the European Beef Sheep Group on Civil Dialogue Group. I've already been doing work on this as chairman of that. We've met the DG Trade many times on it. Ourselves and the French would be key in this. And you know, if you're talking about the powerhouses in beef in Europe, you're talking about the French and ourselves mainly, maybe the Italians and the Spanish. And we really need to work together on this. Like, I know, and this is all around standards. It's all around, and it's all about the way Europe has moved on in the past 10 years, Justin. Our dairy herd has grown. We were once going towards a deficit market in beef. We're now exporting 550,000 tonnes. We've lost 500,000 consumption. You know, we could put the farmers of Europe, the beef farmers of Europe, make them very vulnerable here, make rural areas very vulnerable if this deal is done. And I don't see the concessions coming on the other side. So we very much need, no more than what you did yourselves in Brazil, we have to keep the standards front and centre. And by keeping the standards front and centre, I don't mean some fob up where they say the cattle that come in will be of the standard, it will be turned into a corner and tagged. I don't mean that fob up. I mean that they have to have a database, they have to tag, and you can guarantee you they will never go there.
Joe, you've been out of the European loop maybe for a while, but you obviously have experience in. You were vice president of CIGE beforehand. How would you tackle the issues of Mercosur and TTIP, and have you still got the contacts there and the relationships there to negotiate and to form allegiances in relation to these issues?
Absolutely, as you rightly pointed out, Justin, I was vice president of CIGE, where we worked with the politicians, with the Commission, with the Parliament, and you know, I think at the moment we're in a lucky position in Ireland that we have two key people in Europe, in Mairead McGuinness and Phil Hogan. You know, and I suppose I've worked at various different ways with Mairead over the past 22 years. I came up to this office 22 years ago to be interviewed by her when I was president of MACRA, and then later she was my boss in the Farming Independent, and over the past number of years since she became an MEP, I keep in... You
wouldn't rate Luke Flanagan or Matt Carty
well, Mairead is the most senior of them, and you know, as president of the European Parliament, and you know, I have often met with the Ming and with Matt Carty, and
when were you last in Brussels, Joe?
With Sean Kelly. I was in Brussels actually during the summer, and we've also Phil Hogan, who he was chairman of the government parties in the mid-90s when I was president of MACRA, and got to know him very well at that stage, and he actually even drank tea in my kitchen. So, you know, I've kept in touch with him ever since.
On Brussels,
I've been there regular over the last 4 years on the rural development programme. Obviously, the Lars Hoffman, but also Phil Hogan and his two key advisors, Tom Tynan, and obviously now Michael Tracy. I'd have interacted regularly with them, and I suppose I'd be on a familiar basis with all the MEPs, whether it be my own Sean Tracy from Sean Kelly from my own county, and Mairead McGuinness, and like you said, Matt Carty and all, and Mintline, they all have something to contribute at European level, and I feel that I have the necessary experience and I realise the importance of Europe. You know what I mean? Because I was in my side of the business where I come from in the Western Seaboard. I mean, Europe is also, with the last 20 years, has been where our income has come. We've seen all the cuts coming from the national government. We've seen the disadvantaged area payments now, D&Cs, and the REP schemes being cut because national funding was pulled. The only thing that has held reasonably solid is the EU money. So I realise that the game is in Brussels, and we have to have a strong presence there. But obviously, at the moment, we have the situation where we have an unstable government here, so we need a strong presence at home. But I'm clear in my mind, the big money is in Brussels, and we have to have a strong Brussels office, maybe even souped up, because that's where the real action is.
Souped up, and I've just got a question on my ear. So one reader suggested we zoop it up with bringing back Michael Tracy. Any views?
Justin, I think that, you know, what we need to highlight as well is that we have a very good man there at the moment in Liam McHale, an excellent person who has a long track record of delivery wherever he has worked. So I think the organisation is in a strong position to have a man of his capabilities over there.
Flora, I'll let you go ahead and go on.
I think we should definitely look at taking him on as an advisor. He's obviously working for the Dutch Farmers Union. He's working for Phil Hogan. We definitely have to have him in some capacity
Henry,
involved.
you're nodding in agreement. Can I take it?
25 years of experience. I've worked with the man for the last 10 years. Yeah. And I think just one thing on Europe, Justin, I didn't say is it has transformed in the last 10 years, the co-decision in the Parliament. And I think, look, I'd
And
have
accessibility,
as many phone numbers for Spanish, German, Italian MEPs. You know through CAP what we had to do with those, and they were vital to keep on board. You know there's a third of the Parliament that have no interest in farming, there's another third supportive, and there's a third in the middle we have to drag with us as best as possible. Yeah. And that's one thing I've learned over the last few years. So certainly, I think I value the experience I got in Brussels in the last 10 years very much. I look forward to looking with Liam McHale, but I think it's one of the reasons I've put myself forward. I really value that experience I've got in Brussels, and the contacts are vital.
Okay, guys, if we move on maybe, and it has been a difficult period, I think you've all said at various times in the hustings that you're here under exceptional circumstances, and maybe none of the three of you would have envisaged having been sitting here 2 years ago. And I suppose it has been a difficult period for the organisation. How will you move to rebuild trust and morale in the organisation? Corporate governance issues that implement the Con-Lucy report. Flor, I'll maybe start with you first on that.
Well, Justin, what we have to do is, what I see from most farmers at this stage, down to see IFA getting back working. That's the big issue out there. We obviously need to bring all parts of the organisation with us. I mean, I think I'm uniquely positioned to that. I farm across a lot of different land types. Least land near Cork City that didn't disadvantage. I inherited a severely handicapped farm, and I also have a farm in the hill, mountain land in Commonage, which is a full designation. So we have to, at first, we have to try to unite the organisation, get it moving, and get it working on behalf of farmers. If that doesn't happen fairly quickly, obviously we need full transparency from here forward. I mean, how much people are putting in, where the money is going. And under my leadership, there will be no money going astray. I mean, we have a unique opportunity also to take back IFA to the farmers. It is our organisation to set up for farmers, and maybe we slightly lost the run. The organisation wasn't being controlled by us farmers. That will have to be a cornerstone as we move forward over the next number of years, that the organisation is controlled by farmers and works for farmers. And the big issues for us are income. And there is massive challenges. We see the amount of products we're selling at the moment under the cost of production, like the pig sector there. I mean, if there isn't some movement in these sectors, we're going to see meltdown. So, and a lot of these farmers, they're serious borrowings. And obviously the lack of competition in the marketplace, the banks, these are all major issues. And we need a strong leadership. And like Henry said, we need a person with experience that understands the issues.
We have a question, and I'll ask each and everyone. Will you seek payment? What will your payment terms be, or what will you look for in terms of payment?
It's clearly defined that it will be set up by an independent body. I won't attempt to set my wage. That was where we got us to where we are here today. There was people setting their own wages, or within reason had to say in their own wage. I believe strongly either the President or the General Secretary shouldn't be involved in setting their wage. Obviously, Council must be involved, but they need expert advice from outside to set a wage.
Henry, reinstoring the confidence.
For the confidence of the membership, Justin, the first thing we have to do is, I don't believe we have anything to hide, first of all. And I think the first thing, openness, is it will do us any of us any harm. For the membership on the ground, that is the big disappointment, is the lack of openness and the length it takes to flesh things out. I think the next thing is clearly our structures for a modern organisation. It's not a business, that's a representative organisation that needs to be run business-like, from the point of view of its finances. We need to have an open structure now that people can see what's going on very clearly. And on the payment, I think, the President, I think there was a huge disappointment in the perception of what the President was getting from the point of view of that it was the return for a farm manager home. That was always the perception. That was always the understood. And I think there's a mistrust in the membership on that now, and I think it has to return there. It can't be a profit-making exercise. I'm very clear in that. I've always believed in that myself, and voluntary.
You as livestock chairman, sit on the board of Borbia, Henry, yes. And there is a fee for that.
Yes.
What is that fee?
5,800.
The Con-Lucy recommendation was that all of those fees for external boards would come back in. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, I agree.
Flor?
with that.
Yes.
And just to be clear, Justin, on that, while we were there, we weren't claiming from IFA. That was the structure that was in place. I sit on many other boards and there's no fee. I think it would be a lot cleaner and clearer, absolutely.
And I know it's something that come up in a lot of the hustings, but there's a reader questioning, will you look back before 2009? Joe, maybe you can kick off and come back in the corporate governance issues then as
well. Well look, if the members want to go back to before 2009, it's that's what will happen.
Yeah.
I was at a National Council meeting just before the Christmas, and it came up at that meeting, and the meeting appeared to me to be pretty evenly split on whether we should go back or whether we should just go forward. But I have no problem if I'm president of the IFA, if the members want to go back beyond that. Well, then what I don't want, Justin, is that there will be slippage or revelations coming out, now and again in 6 months and again in a year's time. I think the organisation doesn't need that, because you're going to be rocked to the core each time, So what's to come out, let it out and get it over and done with. Just going back to building the trust and morale, I think, a lot of it is to do with transparency, communication, and delivery, and to have the members reconnecting with the organisation. I think we're seeing at the moment, Justin, now, just how serious, and some people might think that it's not as serious as it is, but we see a lot of apathy even in the voting around the country. Words that's coming back in from the various counties is that turnout is low. And I read more into that than possibly some other people. So I think that we need to ensure that the members on the ground feel a reconnect with the organisation. I think that one way of helping that is to have a more vibrant branch network, a branch network that's meeting at least 3 to 4 times per year, because where they're only meeting once per year, it's really nothing more than a report on the year's work of IFA and to elect officers, rather than a situation where you'd have those members coming in where there's no old news, and they're able to have an input, and they're able to feed into the county executives and also attend the county executives. But I think what we need to do there is to ensure that there's training for all officers across the board, to ensure that county executives are short, concise, and when I say short, like to cover the issues, but in 2 to 2.5 hours, not to go on for 4 hours, and not to have a situation where you'd have 2 or 3 people maybe.
If I don't wrap this up soon, I'll be accused of going for 2.5 hours.
And more use of, I think the commodity committees and the branch chairman, they're the real experts in their area, and I think that we could make a lot more use of those people. So
on salaries, just to keep it fair in all three, the salary for the IFA president.
Yeah, well, look, I have said it from the very start. The first interview I did when I let my name go forward was that when I was asked that question, I said if the farm labour, I'd be satisfied if the farm labour was covered and vouched expenses paid for. But in any case, there's the remuneration committee there, and I agree with the president not sitting on that committee. The president should never sit on a committee that's dealing with his salary or her salary, and that the salary of the person that they'll be expected to work very closely and professionally with over their term.
Joe, you sit on the board of FBD Developments, and there's a fee involved in that?
The Farm Business Developments Cooperative now. I'm a farmer representative on that board, and there's a director's fee of 3,597.
Is that before or after tax?
That's after tax. That's what we get out because the tax is stopped at source.
Yes, so it's actually 6,600 as it says in the annual report.
Well, gross fee, but what?
So it's after tax figure.
After tax figure. That's the.
For how many meetings a year is that, Joe?
Oh, there's probably about 8 meetings a year.
You're well paid for each of your meetings.
There's a lot of the days you're at the meetings. There's a lot of maybe teleconferences or
and do you get expenses on top of that?
Reading
as well?
to do up with. There's expenses like there is for I'm on the farm.
You'll be a lot better. You'll be a lot better paid for FBD than you will be for IFA. I'm
on the farm business committee as well in IFA, and we get on any committee in the IFA we get expenses for that too. And I'm chairman of the Commonages Implementation Committee, and I've received no expenses for that. So they're the boards that I'm on at the moment. Okay,
guys, levies. Levies is a big one coming up. Flora, what would you do at the levies? And it's 4.7 million, nearly half, 40% of IFA income.
Yeah, you correctly pointed out it's nearly 40% of income, and what I find going around the country is farmers want an organisation that's well funded. They want an organisation that can deal with problems. That's coming across clearly, that they want actually IFA to be able to be in a position to deal with problems, but maybe we need to push more of these problems back on the minister. But I am committed to looking at another source of income. and really and genuinely looking at some other way of funding IFA. But
what
obviously,
is it, Flor? Like guys just don't want to committed to looking at it. They want leadership from you. What is it? What is the other sort of income?
I'm also very conscious of the 75 to 80,000 members that we have at the moment, and a lot of these are small farmers. I most definitely don't want to lose them, and a lot of them are paying probably the 75, 80 or 90 euros, and we need them because they have the strength and our lobbying power. So it has to be equitable. It has to take more. That's one thing about the levy. It takes more off the bigger operators, and it's fairer that way. But the alternatives maybe do we have to look at maybe like on the tags. There is that will cater for the bigger fella, but obviously the big group of farmers in paying no levy. But it's also was an issue at the moment that some cattle pay the levy more than once. So it's an issue that needs to be looked at, and I suppose the levy maybe was artificially high because cattle and milk prices were high in that year, so obviously it's going to drop without people stopping the levy. It's going to drop anyway because the value of our stock have fallen. But obviously to have an office and buses and a well-funded office, which we need there, and this costs money. And we're lucky in the lucky position that we have reserves that we can deal with any issues that will arise. But there will be issues. The major challenges for the incoming president was, like has already been said, there is more issues to be dealt with in IFA. And they will have to be dealt with straight away.
Henry, alternatives to the levy?
There's only one alternative if you really want to get away from all this mystery that surrounds the levy. And I've been livestock chairman for 4 years, and I have to be honest, it comes up at a lot of meetings, and if it's coming up from our membership, it's an issue we have to deal with. It's as simple as that. And they have to be part of the decision, Justin, because most of our membership on the ground are the ones that help to collect the membership. And the only option is the only clean option is an increase in the membership. Whether our membership are prepared to wear that or not is another question. The one thing about the levy, it is, as Flor has said, it's proportionate to what you produce. But I think I have committed...
What's this one alternative, though, Henry?
It's an increase in the membership.
Through
membership. Oh yeah, through membership.
But what about the proposals Flor said around tags and moving through marks?
No, because I think ultimately everything can be construed to be so. If what we're using now is construed to be not independent, everything else can be as well, Justin. And that's the bottom line. But because someone has to collect it for you.
But the tags don't. The guy collecting the tags doesn't.
Yeah, but sure, then someone can say there's a tender for tags and we're tied to a tag company or something else. So that's that's what'll happen. That's what'll happen. And as well as that, obviously with the tags is you only have the people that are tagging cattle paying it. People that buy livestock don't pay it. It's not proportionate. So there are issues. I'm saying no matter many suggestions have come up over the years. That's why we have to confront it. We have to confront it now if the membership, because I think otherwise, we have to have the membership part of that decision. It has to be discussed at county executives because remember, the guys that stand for our funding on the ground are the membership. They go around with the development officers and back up this membership. And it's not so simple. So yeah, it's a huge challenge. But I think the membership on the ground are realistic that if the 4.7 million goes, they will not have the same organisation. So the organisation, and there are two choices, but what I'm saying was in 12 months, I will have led that through the organisation. And if the membership are up to that, we'll do it. But they will have to be part of it. I'm not trying to fudge it. They will have to be part of the decision. They would have to be buy-in. And there is mixed views on it.
Joe?
Justin, I sat around the table with people talking about the levy. And one man mentioned exactly what you mentioned about the tags. And the lad that was sitting beside him, he said, you'd know you're a beef finisher. And he was inclined to leave it all to the suckler farmer, and it was a fair point. Another farmer mentioned that... No easy solution. No, there isn't. Another farmer mentioned... but, what I'm trying... I have talked to farmers about it. And another farmer mentioned we should put it on, the membership. That a set rate increase per membership, and the other lad said that's all right for you. He said you're farming 250 acres, I'm only farming 55. So the increase has to be pro rata, and if it's pro rata maybe across the acreage, and then you could have people saying, well, my land isn't as good as yours. But as you said, there's no easy solution. But I think we've no choice, Justin, but to look at the levies because it's itself. I would say the levies, farm incomes. Well, margins and incomes and inspections are probably 3 or 4 of the most contentious issues right throughout this campaign at the hustings. So we've no choice. But
I want to just conclude with splinter groups and how you're going to bring splinter groups in. And Joe, maybe if I could start with you because I want to talk just get your views on what's happening in your own province at the minute and around Connacht and the divisions for the regional chair. How do you see that as like a fly in the ointment for you? I said Henry Burns' Achilles heel might have been the beef for him. Like the fact that you have been unable to unite your own province, and then you talk about uniting the whole organisation nationally. Maybe give the viewers, the listeners, an insight or a response to that.
Yeah. Well, at the moment, I'm a county representative on the IFA Farm Business Committee, and when on your paper and other publications, you highlighted maybe war in Galway at the county executive and different issues around that. I was able to pull the county together and ensure that there was a very peaceful and successful meeting, and that proved that I could unite a county. I think in the province, the province, all the other counties are going very well, and it's difficult to knock a situation where you have so many people interested in letting their names go forward for a big position within the organisation. It's great to see at least one person in every county anxious to get that job, just like it was great. Even in times of trouble within the organisation, we had, 7 members willing to let their names go forward for president, and similar for deputy president. So, it's something that the organisation will have to look at. And I think even when we go beyond this, it's always a situation that can happen again, unless rules are looked at, and it could happen in the other counties as well.
Floor splinter groups?
Or provinces.
I suppose we can't really look at splinter groups until we get IFA back working again on behalf of farmers. The way you get people back on board is like to bring young people in if they feel they can make a difference to their income. I feel a lot of these groups will come back to us again. They'll have dual membership. They'll be members of both organisations. We always have groups, but the challenge for us now, and that's the big challenge for the incoming president, is get the committee structure working within IFA. And then where there is problems, the president and the general secretary would have to meet the groups, because there will always be issues that will fall outside the committee structures, outside the structures. And it's obviously worrying, because it do take from our lobbying power having groups out there. There's 5 or 6 of them different groups, and it's of concern. But maybe it's a wake-up call for us as well. Maybe we need to be able to change quickly or more quickly within the organisation, take advantage of modern technology. We haven't done enough of that. Like our committee structures, there we have management committees. The evening of that meeting, there should be an email going out to the rest of the members of that committee. The small things that can easily be achieved, that we've kind of been stuck in time. I think, and even communicating, maybe even using your paper more to communicate what we are doing. We are doing a lot of things, but people don't know we're doing it on behalf of farmers. And we definitely haven't had enough regional meetings.
I think no doubt just a big impact in the pressure, and I suppose particularly the pressure in the West as where I started on farm incomes. If you lose the reps, if you lose the disadvantaged area payment, and on a small or average farm, that cuts your income way more severely. I think you couldn't rule that out as a significant factor here, the pressure on incomes, and what I said, the not rebuilding of the Irish agricultural budget. And I think, in fairness, the last minister, he failed to get his mind into that concept of that smaller average farmer needing to be supported and given good value for money. And Lord knows we tried, but it didn't resonate enough, and that has been a significant factor. But moving on from that, I think, look, you can't dismiss splinter groups. They came about for a reason. They felt they weren't being represented, pressurised or otherwise. So what we have to do is take the first step and prove to people that we can unify and lead the organisation. I think I would say I've led 2 committees which were very diverse, had a very lot of diverse people on them, from Hill, Nolan, Cheap, some of those people that were involved with me. I try to lead with listening, with bringing the coherence to a view. And I think this is crucial for IFA. This is the crucial moment we have for farmers on the ground, whether it be the biggest farmer or the smallest farmer. This is why IFA was formed, to give a coherent view, so that the vested interests, for want of a better word, the governments, whoever we're lobbying, not let them off the hook, because that's what will happen. Remember, we were formed out of 67
Can I just clarify before you move on from that? when I was talking about Connacht, they aren't splinter groups I was talking about in
and
Connacht.
in fairness, I asked the question.
Yeah, you did. I was answering your question, so I want to be clear on that. They're actually very good and interested IFA people.
I'll hold up my hand.
Just on the other element, you were saying that, look, what has become clear out of this whole the debacle in the IFA is that our structures are out of date. You know, a rule that came in to stop maybe a priest or a doctor becoming the branch chairman because he wasn't a full-time farmer now has constrained some of the possibilities. We have to hold the values of the past, but move our structures on and modernise our rules.
I want to wrap up, and I appreciate it has been a gruelling 7 weeks for you guys, and we said we'd be here. We've shot over our time, and I have a final question in from Twitter from Kieran O'Sullivan, and I started in alphabetical order, and I'll finish in reverse alphabetical order, Flor, with you. And Kieran basically asked, and I'll ask you to give your wrap up in answering this question for over 1 minute, is what separates you from the other candidates? That's the question Kieran asked.
I'm the only man here that has served as county chairman, so I've worked across all the commodities. I've also 30 years experience everything in the Kerry County Executive, 20 years at national level. I'm the longest involved at national level, so I've experience across the Livestock Committee, county chairman 4 years, and I have negotiated with Kerry Group on issues in relation to roads. So I worked across a large section of the farmers within a farm across a large number of sectors. I'm also a family farm. I understand, and my wife are both full-time involved in farming. So I'm uniquely positioned as also in where I live and farming across large types, different land types, to unite IFA, which I think is the number one thing we have to do. We have to unite this organisation. And obviously, I'm also driven. I started with very small land base. I've expanded that substantially. So I've proven it in my own business. And I think upmost, the farmman that leads this organisation needs to be a strong farmer and understand the issues of everyday farming. And I feel I am that man. And I'm appealing for your listeners to vote number one to make Flor McCarthy the next president of IFA. Thanks, Justin.
Joe?
Yeah, Justin, I think that the next president of IFA is a crucial position for the organisation, and I think the turnout at the moment is telling us that. People aren't happy with what has gone on, and I think the next person needs a broad range of interests both inside and outside the organisation. They want transparency, but they want, as I said, that broad range of experience. I've been a former president of Macra na Ferma. I'm the only candidate to have led a national organisation, and there's a difference in that and being chairman of a particular group. I've been vice president of the European Young Farmers. I've managed and chaired at the Ryan Mart, and for 12 years I've been the markets reporter on beef and sheep for the Farming Independent, as well as serving on other boards. But I think that level of experience has allowed me to deal with members, with banks, with staff, with media, and with politicians of all creeds, both inside and outside the country. And I have a record there of delivering for farmers at every area that I've been involved in. And I think that level of experience is what the next president of the IFA has to have, that broad level of experience. I have that, so I'm asking the members to vote for that experience and vote for Joe Healy to be their next president. Henry?
Well, look, I'd follow on. I have a lot of that experience as well, the broad range of experience in farming, being involved with marts and all that thing. But I think there is a differentiation. The commitment I have given to farmer representation at all levels in the organisation, but particularly in the last 10 years, I've given my life. I've given over my life to representing the section of farmers I was representing, but I would dearly love to represent all farmers. I think the experience I have gained, particularly at European level, but at national level too, lobbying 3 different ministers, working with 3 very different ministers, treating them in all the different ways, but never letting go of the farmer side of the argument. I think that is vital. I think another thing, if we are to change this organisation and reform it, you need to know the people, both inside and outside the organisation that you're going to work with. Like, it's not viable to think you can walk in and wave a magic wand. You've got to know the personalities, the people. You've got to know the people in Brussels. You've got to know the people in the department. You've got to know the people in IFA. You've got to know the people in the journal. I have worked closely with all those people in the last few years, and I think it does give me a coherent experience. I think a testimony is all the people that I've served with are, very supportive of me getting this job. All the good IFA people. I think I have a standing and an ability to bring people together, and I think that's what we need. And I think I'm the youngest candidate with a high energy level that I want to give it full blow for 4 years, and I will give that full commitment to the members.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately we've run out of time, and as ever the time seems to move exceptionally fast in this environment. I would like to apologise actually to all the readers and or all our listeners and viewers that sent in questions that we didn't get a chance to get round to. I did say at the outset we'd struggle to cover all sectors. We've had a lot of questions in on pigs and poultry, which we haven't got to, unfortunately, but I would like to thank you all for joining us this evening. We hope that we helped you inform your thinking around who you'll vote for in the IFA elections and who will best represent your views. The Irish Farmers Journal is delighted to have reported live from every one of the hustings across the country, the presidential hustings, and you can find out what each of the candidates said in the debate at farmersjournal.ie. So you can pick holes in what they said tonight versus what they said maybe in Sligo or whatnot. But I would also like to sincerely thank the three guys. It has been a gruelling 26 meetings over the last 7 weeks. I think one of you has mentioned in terms of if you can, one positive we can take out of this is the calibre of people that have both put themselves forward for president and deputy president. I think it puts the IFA and farming in a strong position. And could I take this opportunity to wish each and every one of you the very best between now and when voting closes and in the day of the count, which is the 19th of April. We will continue our IFA election coverage over the coming weeks, and we'll again have a live broadcast brought to you from the election centre on the 19th of April. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time, and once again thank you for the three candidates tonight for all the effort that they've put in. Thank you.